Picture this. You're standing on top of a mountain in Texas.
Okay, sounds like a nice start.
Right. Mount Lock, to be exact. You're right on the observation deck of the McDonald
All
Observatory.
gorgeous views up there.
Exactly. It's a beautiful, crisp night, like 8:30 p.m., and you are surrounded by about 150 other people.
Just, tourists and stargazers.
Yeah, tourists, stargazers, some scientists. Everyone's all bundled up, sipping coffee, just looking up at the vast Texas night sky.
They're peaceful.
It's incredibly peaceful, cinematic even. But what you don't know, what absolutely none of those 150 innocent people looking up at the stars know, is that they are standing directly in the center of a trap.
Wow. Okay, that escalates quickly.
Oh, it gets worse. In a matter of minutes, unless a very specific, very desperate plan works, every single person on that deck is going to be violently launched 500 feet into the night sky.
Jeez. That's terrifying.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are opening up the case files for Season 2, Episode 6 of the series Bible. It's aptly titled Escape Velocity.
A very fitting title, considering the stakes.
Right. We are following the behavioral probability unit as they confront the Marfa gravity inversion finale. Basically, a killer has weaponized the fundamental laws of physics against an entire crowd of people.
And, the sheer scale of the threat here really alters the DNA of a typical hostage situation.
Yeah, how so?
Well, the behavioral probability unit isn't like negotiating with someone holding a detonator. They are racing against an invisible, ticking bomb of just unimaginable kinetic energy.
Engineered by Dr. Silas Vance.
Exactly. Silas has completely bypassed conventional weapons here.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Silas Vance's methodology is what makes this scenario so terrifying. He isn't some guy making empty threats.
Right. He doesn't use guns or poison.
No, not at all. The case files show that Silas previously murdered a colleague by using industrial electromagnets to essentially fall him upward into a ceiling.
Which is just a brutal, physics-defying execution.
Yeah, he weaponized magnetic fields to generate over 4 Gs of upward acceleration. It instantly crushed his victim against the architecture.
It's just unbelievable force.
And now, on Mount Lock, he has scaled up that exact same operation to a mass casualty level.
Which is wild, because moving from a targeted assassination in a closed room to an area of effect weapon on a public mountain peak, that requires an astonishing leap in engineering.
For sure. It's a massive undertaking.
Silas relies on precision. The trap he set, which the unit actually refers to as the magnetic riptide, it doesn't rely on explosive chemistry.
Right.
It relies on manipulating the environment at a quantum level. He's literally turning the victim's own biology into the mechanism of their destruction.
Which is just, wow. And that brings us to the danger hidden in plain sight. Looking at Agent Hatch's audio log from the scene.
Hatch is the one embedded in the crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Hatch is on the telescope deck, completely surrounded by all these innocent bystanders. And Hatch realizes that Silas has buried a massive ring of superconducting magnets all the way around the perimeter.
Right, under their feet.
Yeah. And the chilling detail is how Silas disguised the liquid helium-cooled cryostats.
Those are the massive cooling units needed to keep the magnets functional.
Right. He disguised them as ordinary knee-high landscape lights. They just look like simple path illuminators.
That is so sinister.
But the raw power humming beneath the concrete is so intense that Hatch reports the air feeling thick with static. Like, Hatch's sidearm is actually vibrating in its holster from the ambient magnetic flux bleeding into the environment.
And that vibrating sidearm is, it's a brilliant tactile warning. It indicates the magnetic field is already saturating the deck, just looking for anything to interact with.
It's terrifying.
It is. And it leads directly to the core scientific mechanism Silas is exploiting here, diamagnetic levitation.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, most of us are familiar with ferromagnetism, right? Like the way iron or steel is violently attracted to a magnet.
Sure, like magnets on a fridge.
Exactly. But diamagnetism operates on the exact opposite principle. It is a property where a material, when exposed to an external magnetic field, actually creates its own opposing magnetic field.
So it actively repels the magnet.
Right. It pushes away.
So I was reading up on the actual physics of this to understand how it works at a micro level, because it's not just magnets pushing away, right?
No, it's much deeper than that.
From what I understand, When a diamagnetic material is placed in a strong magnetic field, that external field actually alters the orbital motion of the electrons within the material's atoms.
Exactly.
And that microscopic shift in the electron orbit induces a tiny opposing magnetic field. It's essentially the atoms themselves rebelling against the outside force.
The atomic rebellion is the perfect way to phrase it.
And the terrifying application here is that water is highly diamagnetic. So because the human body is basically a giant vessel of diamagnetic water, the magnetic field is going to treat the crowd like a physical object to be repelled.
Right. Every water molecule in those 150 people is being primed to push back.
It's like a reverse gravity trampoline, but with absolutely no net to catch them on the way down.
That's a horrifying mental image.
But wait, how much power does it actually take to repel human biology like that? I mean, is the body basically just being treated like a giant water balloon by these magnets?
Well, what's fascinating here is how weak diamagnetism is under normal circumstances. Physicists have famously demonstrated this in real-world lab experiments by levitating a live frog.
A frog?
Yeah, a tiny live frog. And to levitate that single frog, they needed a continuous magnetic field of about 16 Tesla.
Which is how much, relatively speaking?
That is roughly 1,000,000 times stronger than the Earth's natural magnetic field.
Oh, wow. Think about the sheer scale of that. If it takes 1,000,000 times the Earth's magnetic pull just to float an amphibian in a controlled lab,
Right.
the amount of power Silas needs to violently launch 150 adult humans 500 feet into the air simultaneously, it's almost incomprehensible.
It really is. We are talking about magnetic fields so powerful they would normally only exist inside a particle accelerator or like an experimental fusion reactor.
And he has secretly buried a fusion-level magnetic array under a public observation deck?
Which is why the psychological horror of this trap is just so potent. You can't just drop your weapons or empty your pockets to escape the magnetic pull.
Because the pull isn't on your keys.
No, exactly. You can't leave your water behind. Your body is the projectile. Silas is literally turning the life force of his victims against them.
So you're the behavioral probability unit. You're standing on the deck. The fake landscape lights are humming. The static is making the hair on your arms stand up. And the guns are literally vibrating.
A complete nightmare scenario.
The 101 level crisis response is to find the power source and cut it, right? You dismantle the bomb by unplugging it.
Normally, yes.
But the physics literally put them in a checkmate. How do you even begin to dismantle a bomb when turning it off is the very thing that triggers it?
The grid problem. Yeah, this is where it gets incredibly tense. Jax, the unit's technical specialist, scans the local electrical infrastructure and realizes Silas didn't just plug this array into a standard wall socket.
No, that would be too easy.
Way too easy. He bypassed the local breakers entirely and tapped the superconducting magnets directly into the observatory's dedicated high-voltage substation.
Whoa, so it's pulling massive amounts of power.
The system is fully energized with a massive dedicated flow of current.
And Jax communicates over the secure comms that cutting the power is a death sentence.
Right.
Because if Jax kills the grid, the sudden drop in power will cause the superconducting magnets to instantly lose their zero resistance state, which triggers what is known as a quench.
A quench is incredibly dangerous.
I was trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of a quench, and it makes sense if you think about it like a massive multi-lane superhighway.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Superconducting magnets rely on liquid helium to stay near absolute zero. At that temperature, electrical resistance vanishes completely.
Zero friction.
Exactly. The current flows infinitely, like millions of cars speeding down a completely frictionless 100-lane highway. But if you cut the power to the cooling systems, the wire heats up and superconductivity collapses.
It happens instantly.
Right. It's as if that 100-lane superhighway instantly condenses into a single, unpaved dirt road.
And the resulting friction is catastrophic.
Yeah.
All of that stored electrical and magnetic energy has nowhere to go, so it converts into heat in a fraction of a second.
Just a massive burst of heat.
Huge. The temperature spike causes the liquid helium surrounding the magnets to violently boil off, and liquid helium expands to over 700 times its original volume when it turns into a gas.
Oh my God.
So if Jax cuts the power, the cryostats will violently rupture. The trap immediately transitions from a levitation device into a localized, devastating thermobaric explosion.
A bomb made of rapidly expanding gas and raw electrical discharge.
Exactly. Everyone on the deck dies instantly.
So they are completely trapped by the infrastructure. Letting Silas trigger the final launch sequence sends 150 people into the stratosphere. But cutting the dormant power blows them all up.
It's a flawless tactical bottleneck.
which forces Agent Cross and Eris to engineer a brilliant pivot. If they can't cut the power, they have to ground it. They have to use the laws of physics against themselves to survive the launch.
And to do that, they rely on destructive interference, leaning heavily on Lenz's law.
Lenz's law. Let's get into this.
Eris realizes that if they can introduce a highly conductive bridge directly across the magnetic ring before the launch triggers, they can force the magnetic field to fight itself.
This is where it gets really fascinating, because Lenz's law is essentially nature's way of abhorring a sudden change.
Right. Nature loves equilibrium.
Exactly. When you expose a highly conductive material like copper to a rapidly changing magnetic field, that changing field induces an electrical current inside the conductor.
These are called eddy currents.
But the crucial part of Lenz's law is that these newly created currents don't just sit there, right? They naturally flow in a specific direction that creates their own magnetic field.
Yes.
And that secondary field will always, mathematically and physically, oppose the original magnetic field that created it.
Right. So the moment the massive surge of magnetic flux from Silas's array hits the copper uses that exact same energy to generate a mirrored opposing force.
So let me get this straight. The only way to fight a giant, deadly magnet without blowing everyone up is to trick it into creating a ghost magnet that fights back.
That is exactly what happens. It's almost like the primary magnet creates its own worst enemy inside the copper.
Unbelievable.
The BPU realizes that if they lay this conductive bridge down, they create a magnetic break.
So instead of the field accelerating the diamagnetic water in the victims' bodies upward at a deadly 4Gs,
The primary field slams into the ghost field instead. The two fields fight each other, basically canceling out the extreme extremes.
Wow. The destructive interference dampens the launch force.
Right. Now, the sheer power of the substation means it won't stop the levitation entirely, but it flattens the acceleration curve from a deadly cannon shot into a manageable hover.
But having the quantum mechanics figured out over the radio is entirely different from physically executing the plan.
Yeah, the math is easy compared to the reality.
They need precious seconds to get this massive conductive bridge into position before Silas unleashes the full flux. And to buy that time, the science demands a distraction.
Which takes us off the windy observation deck and into the sterile, high-tech environment of the Otto Struve telescope control room.
The contrast between those two environments is striking. Outside, you have raw panic and the physical threat of the magnetic field. But inside the control room, you have this chilling, quiet confrontation between Elias Vance and Silas Vance.
Right. The two Vances finally face off.
When Elias bursts into the room, he doesn't find Silas looking through the magnificent telescope at the stars. Silas is staring out the observation window at the deck, treating his fellow human beings like insects in a terrarium.
It's so cold.
And there's this incredibly tense moment in the control room logs where Silas essentially admits his God complex. He tells Elias, quote, "Probability is just a lack of data. I have the data. I can make the heavy world light."
Oh, chilling.
And Elias immediately counters him, pointing out, quote, "You're not making it light, Silas. You're just replacing one cage with another."
That exchange really exposes the core rot in Silas's worldview. He views human life strictly as an equation to be solved.
Nothing more than numbers.
Right. To Silas, the messiness of being alive, chance, free will, probability, all of that is just a symptom of human ignorance. He genuinely believes that with enough data and raw physical power, he can rewrite the rules of reality.
He strips the people on that deck of their humanity.
Totally. He sees them only as sacks of diamagnetic fluid necessary for his grand experiment.
And Elias strikes right at the philosophical flaw of that perspective. By saying Silas is just replacing one cage with another, Elias highlights the devastating human cost of this extreme determinism.
Exactly. Silas might be defying the literal force of gravity, but he isn't liberating anyone.
Not at all. He's trapping 150 people in his rigid mechanical design. Stripping people of their agency and forcing certainty upon them isn't freedom. It's tyranny disguised as science.
Well said. And while Silas is utterly consumed by this philosophical debate, believing his intellect has already won the day, the physical reality is playing out down on the deck.
Yes, because Silas is distracted just long enough for Agent Hatch to act.
Hatch is the real MVP here.
Hatch really is. Hatch is using a tactical grapple to drag a heavy EMI shielding copper mesh screen, that's the conductive bridge Eris requested, directly across the main magnetic coil.
And the physical exertion required to do this is immense. Copper itself isn't ferromagnetic, so the magnet isn't pulling the net out of Hatch's hands.
Right.
But moving a mass conductor through an active magnetic field induces electrical resistance. Hatch is essentially dragging this heavy net through an invisible swamp of electromagnetic friction.
It's a profound contrast. You have two men in a quiet room debating the nature of the universe, and outside, a desperate agent is sweating and straining to drag a copper net across a concrete floor just to keep 150 people from being shot into the sky.
It's incredible. And the timing comes down to the absolute millisecond. The ideological debate ends the exact moment Silas finally flips the main switch.
He sends the catastrophic surge of power from the substation into the liquid helium-cooled cryostats.
Yeah, the launch sequence is triggered.
Elias Vance's final case log captures the climax beautifully. The surge hits. But Hatch managed to get the copper mesh in place just a fraction of a second prior.
Just in the nick of time.
The massive spike in magnetic flux slams into the copper shield. Lenz's law instantly takes over. The eddy currents scream to life inside the metal, generating the massive opposing ghost magnet.
And the magnetic brake engages.
Yes. The destructive interference works exactly as Eris calculated. The violent 4G upward acceleration is immediately damped.
Which is just a massive relief.
Instead of a launch that would have snapped necks and sent bodies flying into the stratosphere, the deck experiences a localized levitation.
Incredible visual.
Right. 150 terrified tourists and scientists, clutching their coats and thermos cups, are suddenly lifted gently off the concrete.
Wow.
For 10 agonizing seconds, they simply float, hovering 6 inches in the air.
6 inches off the ground.
Yeah. The primary magnetic field and the ghost field are violently warring beneath them, but the humans are caught perfectly in the balanced crossfire.
Just floating there.
And after 10 seconds, the system safely cycles down. The magnets depower, gravity reasserts itself, and 150 people drop 6 inches safely onto the hard deck.
They survive because the unit recognized that physics isn't inherently evil.
That's a great point.
Silas tried to weaponize the fundamental laws of the universe, but the behavioral probability unit used those exact same laws as a shield. Knowledge and applied science literally grounded them.
Dr. Silas Vance is arrested in the control room, completely stunned that his flawless equation was dismantled by a copper net.
I bet he was.
The final log states he's being transported to a high-security facility. The Marfa gravity inversion case is officially closed.
Another one in the books for the BPU.
So, what does this all mean? Why does this case file resonate so deeply? I think it proves that understanding the mechanics of the world isn't just an academic exercise.
Not at all.
When you truly grasp the underlying mechanisms of reality, you can dismantle the impossible.
It strips away the magic of the threat. The moment you understand the why behind the danger, you can engineer the how of the survival.
Absolutely. And just when you think the BPU gets a moment to catch their breath, the universe throws another anomaly their way.
Oh, there's always another one.
As sourced directly from the series Bible, we have to deliver the exact tagline setting up the next mystery. Jax is already looking at the next case.
What did Jax find?
What are the odds that an entire forest decides to grow sideways? Jax just found satellite imagery of the Great Bear Rainforest in British Columbia, where the trees are growing parallel to the ground, defying every law of phototropism. The behavioral probability unit is heading north to the woods. See you next time.
Defying phototropism on a massive scale. The Marfa case might be closed, but it seems the environmental anomalies are only escalating.
It's going to be a wild ride uncovering that one. But before you step away, before you go back to your day in a world where gravity and magnets behave exactly as you expect them to, I want to leave you with a lingering thought.
Give it to them.
A question building directly on Silas Vance's chilling worldview in that control room. Think about your own life for a second. All the chance encounters, the lucky breaks, the random near misses that led you to where you are right now.
Yeah, all the messy probabilities.
If you possessed the ultimate algorithm, if you could perfectly measure every single variable and piece of data in your life, eliminating all probability, all chance, and all the unknown forever, would you finally feel liberated? Or would you find that absolute certainty is just a cage of your own making?